Hi, I'm Tamsin Baldwin and I'm victim care worker for Imara.
And I'm Kath Waitman and I'm a specialist trauma therapist for Imara.
We're an early intervention support service for child abuse victims and their families following a disclosure or discovery of child abuse.
And Imara was set up as a community interest company, which is a not-for-profit organisation, in order to provide this service. And we spent 18 months having discussions and careful planning with various partner organisations within Nottingham, both from the statutory sector and the voluntary sector. And those included the police, social care, education, the University of Nottingham, the Crown Prosecution Service,
Victim support.
and victim support. And these organisations have carried on being part of our working group, so they help supervise and monitor the work that we're doing and providing. But like us, they'd recognised that there was a real gap in service for child victims.
Yeah, I worked on the child abuse unit at the police, and it was apparent that there was a void in child abuse victims and their families receiving any type of support at all. And if they did manage to get any, it was often 18 months down the line rather than early intervention when they needed the support most.
And I was working for a specialist therapy service, and was very aware that by the time children and their families came to us, they were often stuck in very traumatic patterns of behaviour, often sort of with splits in the family and divided loyalties, which meant that parents were struggling to support children and teenagers in the best way that they could.
So I think we're really lucky to have the support of all the multi-agencies that have also appreciated that this void is there and that have helped and support us to set up. So, as I said before, I'm a victim care worker. Kath and I are based at the Nottinghamshire Police Child Abuse Unit for the city. At the moment, the project just covers Nottingham City, but we're hoping to expand to the county. As soon as a referral is received into the police, Imara are notified of that so that we can become involved with families at an early stage. So I go and meet the families and explain to them all about our service and how my role is to act as a single point of contact for them. I think when something traumatic happens to families, often things that they would normally be able to deal with, they then find very difficult. And so I end up helping them with lots of different things, not just necessarily about the police investigation, but schooling, housing, employment, a range of things that they may be struggling with at the time. But I have access to the police system, so I'm able to provide updates to them, because I think sometimes it can be difficult to get hold of police officers or social workers that may be out and about, and when the family need the information, I can be there to give it to them. I think they find it quite helpful just having one person to ring rather than having to phone around various agencies. So I meet with the family, and then I do a referral through to Kath, who does a therapeutic assessment of them. Maybe you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah, okay. So as the specialist trauma therapist, I meet with the family, and that may be the child victim, it may also be siblings within the family and parents or carers, sometimes grandparents within the family, to help establish really a baseline of how they're doing, how they've been affected by the child's disclosure, and what interventions might be helpful. Some of those interventions I may provide, I do some very early work around grounding techniques, and a safe place measure, which is to help support young people and adults as well if they're having sleep disturbances, nightmares, flashbacks, or anxiety or panic attacks, some, which are very frequent experiences for the families that we've worked with. I use 3 evaluation measures, and we're going to use those over a period of time that we're working with the families that we work with, and that will allow us to sort of see what the recovery is like for individuals, because I think one of the things we've learned over the last 9 months is it's a very unique journey of recovery for each individual that we work with. So that will help us map out how they're doing, and also how effective our interventions have been as well.
As we say, we'll be involved with them for a minimum of 12 months,
yeah.
Because I think the criminal justice system can take quite a long time to get through, so we say that we're there throughout for them, don't we?
Yeah. Having done my assessment, I then think with the family and the young person whether there's an appropriate organisation for them to be referred on to. So for some young people that's been referred to Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, for others it's to local voluntary organisations that offer a more specialist sexual abuse service. For other people, we would then move into a period of watchful waiting. They may feel that they're not ready for counselling or therapy right now, but have perhaps found the measures that I've used with them useful in helping them move on and begin to feel a little bit safer. And also I think the interventions that Tamsin's providing that mean they feel very supported throughout the investigation and the court case that's ahead of them. So I think we both feel it's quite a unique service that we're operating, and as though we've talked about it almost like we're the glue that fits all the organisations in the Child's Network together.
Yeah, we very much link them all together. I think all the other agencies tend to do a very small piece of the whole picture, really. The police step out when the police investigation's finished or the court cases come to an end. Children's Services will step out when the child's safe, and very often just leaving the family still in a state of trauma, which is why we want to be involved with them for as long as they need.
Yeah, it's that sort of, I think our impression and what we're hearing from children and families is that they're really valuing that flexible, responsive approach that we provide. That does mean if something, a new hurdle that they hadn't anticipated is thrown up, and that may be that hearing that the suspect isn't being charged may be a particular hurdle for children and families, that they can immediately contact us. We've met them from earlier on, so we've got a bit of an idea what their story is and can step in at that point to facilitate moving on.
I think it definitely showed that before we were there was a massive void and it was needed. We did a lot of research that showed that early intervention is definitely what's needed in a more helpful recovery for children and families. In the police figures before we started, the same children were very often repeat victims coming back to the child abuse unit 3, 4, as many as 6 times. And so we're hoping that with our intervention, those figures will definitely decrease. That we
can sort of interrupt that cycle. And we're also very aware from families that have been referred to us that there's a significant degree of generational abuse that we're hearing about. So again, the importance for us of feeling that we have an opportunity to interrupt a cycle, and for a child and young person to feel that they've got positive choices to make, and not to continue seeing themselves as a victim, but to move on very positively, perhaps with education or with family relationships.
I think these figures also showed us as well that unfortunately some of the victims that had come through the unit also then went on to become suspects in other cases, and I think it's also important for us to try and interrupt that cycle of victims becoming offenders and provide them with the right support at the time when they need it. Very often when you worked in your previous job, you didn't see them till much later, did you? And I think you saw the impact of that there.
Yeah, particularly hearing from parents that they might have really struggled with feeling that they'd been unsupported, so it was very hard to then support their child, particularly when the disclosure of abuse can often throw up lots of challenges to everybody in the family, because the suspect may be a loved member of the family, and there's all that adjustment and the potential for split in the family. Yeah, so I think we feel that our roles really complement each other, and I think that's one of our unique points of Imara, is that we've got the legal experience and we've got the therapeutic experience, that we bring it together, and I think that's very much a resource for our partner organisations to use and benefit from in their dealings with the family and the young person.
And I think it's also something else that we provide to the children and families is when we first meet them, we provide them with an information pack that consists of information about Kath and myself and what we offer to them, but also details of local and national counselling services, details about the court system, and also frequently asked question booklets that I think are really helpful to families. Another part of Imara's service is that we provide pre-trial therapy training to professionals working in a similar arena to ourselves. I think there was a common misconception that children couldn't have therapy pre-trial because it would damage the case, and that isn't so. I don't know if you want to tell a little bit more about that.
I think that came out of our conversations with all the various organisations who support us on our working group, to realise that yes, this was a gap in the area, and that was one of the reasons why children weren't getting therapy sometimes for 12 to 18 months, because of this misconception. and what we've done is developed a day training package which explains the pre-trial therapy guidelines so that practitioners are very aware of what the guidelines are, they feel confident to work within the guidelines, and it gives them an opportunity to ask questions and talk about some of their anxieties and concerns about working with a child, some of which will be about their fear of contaminating the court and not, in a way making things worse for a child victim.
And hopefully that will mean that more children will be able to access support services at a much earlier stage.
And I think before we finish or conclude, we'd like to just say a little bit about what we see as the values that children, teenagers and families hold for Imara, what they value in our service.
I think certainly the feedback that I get about your role is that when we get involved with children and families, they really have problems with sleep, as we've discussed before, and having those grounding techniques that you provide so early means that they're starting to recover so much quicker.
Which is so positive, isn't it, for a family to feel like, we're already beginning to take some steps, even if they're very small steps, towards feeling better and feeling optimistic and hopeful that we will, as a family, we will recover from this. And in terms of what I hear from families and children about the service that you provide, it's that very flexible, responsive approach, and the experience and expertise you have in legal matters, which means that they feel very well supported, at each step of the way, whenever it's helpful to them. And I think to have somebody who understands the process they're going through, so they're not having to constantly explain to somebody about what they're experiencing and what it's like.
Yeah, I think because they have to go over details of things so much with the other agencies, it's nice for them to think, oh, well, that person knows. I don't have to necessarily go over it, and because I'm not a figure of authority to them, it makes it a bit easier for them.